I'll start again. Tēnā koutou katoa, and welcome to the Sustainable Business Network's latest webinar this lunchtime. Thanks very much for joining us today on this quite cold day, I think, across the country. This is the second in our webinar series focused on climate action. Today, we'll be looking into how our energy use in our buildings and how we make our buildings affects our carbon emissions. And yeah, cold day today, no doubt. Energy use has been cranking up over the last few days across the country. I think it was -5 this morning in Christchurch. So lots of cold weather about and lots of energy use, I imagine. So my name is Phil Jones and I'll be your MC for today's session. First, give a bit of background about the Sustainable Business Network. Many of you probably are familiar with our network. But in particular, we run projects that across the sustainability landscape, so covering three main areas: waste and the circular economy, water and climate. And for each of those areas, we really help collaborate with others to co-create solutions that kind of begin to address some of our key sustainability challenges that we have. I lead our climate-related work, and one project in particular we're running at the moment is Climate Action 2025. So this is a project really aimed at helping smaller and medium-sized enterprises to begin to take climate action. Very important that we engage all of our business community in beginning to address it as a sector. So we're in the process of developing an online toolkit which is aimed at helping those smaller businesses start out on their climate action journey. And on the holding slide that you probably saw at the beginning of the webinar, we listed six main partners involved in the project. So a big thanks to them for their support for that project. So what we're going to do today is focusing on energy use in our buildings, and as I say, in the manufacture and operations of our buildings. So collectively, that's a really important area in terms of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So we've got three great contributors today: Brad Crowley from the New Zealand Green Building Council, Amber Williams from the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, EECA, and to give a business perspective, Jenny Carter from Soar Printing, who are based in Auckland. So after we've heard from each of them, we'll have a panel discussion. So please use the question and answer feature within the Zoom system to ask questions as we go along. And if you're joining us on Facebook, please enter any questions via the comments feature on Facebook, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them at the end of this session. So before we kick off on that, we thought we'd ask you a couple of questions. This unfortunately is only available to those who have joined on Zoom, so apologies to those on Facebook. So both these questions relate to a study that was done in 2018 by ThinkStep, who are one of our network organization members. So let me pull up the first one, which is, there we go, launch polling. What is the proportion of New Zealand's carbon footprint associated with the built environment? So please select the one you think is relevant there. We'll give a good amount of time. There's a good spread at the moment. Still a few coming on. There's a few of you who haven't. If you do have an opportunity just to quickly tell us what you think. Okay, one more is added. Let me finish it now and share results. Here we go. So over half think it is the 20% and a mix for the rest. They mainly 15%. Top marks for those who put 20%, because that study did indicate that 20% of our carbon emissions do actually come from the built environment in terms of the manufacturing of the materials in our buildings and also the energy use within the buildings themselves. So that's the first one, and I hope I can stop sharing results. Oh, poll 2, here we go. So the next poll is a follow-on from that. What is the proportion of the amount that's used for the built environment? What's the proportion of those emissions associated with the manufacture and construction of building materials, which are generally known as the embodied emissions, i.e. the emissions associated with the building materials themselves? Good, good. We're nearly there, 24. A few more to go. Let me end the polling now, share the results. And again, top marks, just over half of you got this one right as well. It is about half associated with the building materials themselves. So good, good. That leads us nicely on. Let me just share those results. There we go. Stop sharing. Close it up. So that leads quite nicely on to our first presenter. So really warm welcome to Brad Crowley, who is the Senior Manager for Buildings and Communities at the New Zealand Green Building Council. Brad, I know that topic's close to the heart of you and your organisation.
It certainly is, yeah. Thank you so much for the introduction, Kia ora. Thank you for having me, and it's great to be here with Phil and the Sustainable Business Network, a great organization that we're happy to work with. Yeah, so as you mentioned, buildings here in New Zealand account for about 20% of the carbon emissions, with half of them related to actually the embodied carbon. So that's actually the carbon that occurs when you actually build the building. So that's often related mostly with cement. With just by creating cement, you actually create carbon emissions. And of course, steel is another product that has a lot of carbon emissions associated with it. So just by building a building, you're actually kind of locking yourself into a fair amount of embodied carbon. So it's just trying to make people think about that when they build their buildings, to try and make them as low carbon as possible. One way you can do that is by having a life cycle assessment of the building to actually see what the circular nature of the carbon is related to the building, all the way from the mining of the materials to transporting the materials to the site to actually building the building, and then when it's finally deconstructed, hopefully, and what happens with that after the fact, when the building's the end of its life. And of course, the other half of it is related to the operational energy, operational emissions related to the operation of the building. And there's several ways in which you can actually try and bring that down. Of course, ideally, in a perfect world, the building's built efficiently from the get-go, and it's aiming at actually Neighbors NZ, for example, to be an energy efficient building. If it was built a long time ago, then we encourage building owners and operators to try and make the buildings more efficient by retrofitting. So a lot of people talk about trying to get renewable energy here in New Zealand, which of course we don't discourage, but we're lucky here in New Zealand that we've got 85% of the grid is renewable energy. So really, instead of putting the energy and money into more dams, which probably won't happen, or wind turbines, it actually makes sense to make the buildings more efficient, so you're not actually have to waste that energy on those inefficient buildings. So we're advocating for that for both commercial and residential buildings, to try and do that as a potential shovel-ready project, because not only is it a great way to save money for companies and buildings and operations, but also it's a great way to employ people with a very good skilled technical skill. So that's certainly something that we're advocating for here in New Zealand, especially with COVID-19 and what's happening here. On top of energy, buildings also account for 17% of freshwater consumption, 40 to 50% of raw materials used, and as we already said, 30 to 40% of energy used. So really, I got into sustainability back in 1998, and I realized very early on that buildings is really the way in which we actually have one of the easiest, I shouldn't say easiest, but one of the most important ways to actually try and reduce our emissions and our effect upon the planet. Here at New Zealand Green Building Council, we've got several tools that we use, Green Star and Homestar. And the great thing about our tools is it doesn't just look at carbon emissions, which of course are very important, but also it's not the end all be all. There are other things to look at, such as indoor environmental quality and trying to make sure that we have good daylighting for people. We minimize the amount of emissions that are coming off of your paint and what have you affecting people. So it's making it a safe and enjoyable place to work or live on top of being good for the environment. So it's trying to look at the big picture. But of course, right now, the thing everyone's talking about, which is very important, is carbon emissions. And once again, making your buildings more efficient and actually lowering the carbon in it is one of the better ways to do it. And it's not as contentious as some of the other areas as people talk about for what we need to do here in New Zealand to reduce our emissions. Some other benefits of green buildings is it usually reduces construction demolition waste, diverting it from the landfill, or actually making sure that you're designing it to actually have lower waste in the first place. Healthier rivers, so trying to minimize the amount of stormwater leaving the site and trying to deal with the stormwater on site. And as I mentioned, healthier buildings, so making it healthier for the people who work and live there in the buildings. And as I mentioned, it's far more efficient to make the buildings more efficient than it is to build more wind turbines or what have you. Just like it's more efficient to make our buildings more water efficient rather than building more dams. I used to run my own business back in Portland, Oregon, advocating and installing rainwater harvesting systems like rain barrels and rainwater tanks. So I've owned a small business, and I can appreciate what all of you have to do going through that. It's a great experience, but it's not easy. So my hat's off to you. But what I spent most of my time before I actually would install rainwater systems is actually encouraging people to be more water efficient, because it didn't make much sense for them to spend all this money up front for a rainwater tank when they could do an easy thing such as installing a low flow toilet or low flow water faucet. So it's really looking at the low hanging fruit like that, where you work and where you live, to try and actually make things better for the environment. And actually often it is cost savings too. So what can you do? Like I mentioned, just looking at the low hanging fruit, such as, making things more efficient, insulating your buildings, trying to find drafts, trying to be more efficient with the products you're purchasing, such as Energy Star and the water ratings of appliances you might build or products you might use. As mentioned, it's really encouraged that if you're going to be moving into a new space, to ask, is that building built to Green Star? Or is it been rated to Neighbors NZ, which is EECA actually brought it over from Australia, and we operate it or run it here. And like I said, making sure any products that you're purchasing are energy and water efficient. And actually, another thing I recommend is starting a green team or sustainability team. There's probably a fair amount of people who work with you that are really excited and interested in the environment. And if you kind of give them an opportunity to be involved from the ground up to actually change the way your company operates to be greener, will probably empower them and make them really excited and happier to work with you. And one other thing is MB right now has got the Building for Climate Change document, which is actually trying to change our building code, which, as probably everyone knows, is pretty abysmal compared to the rest of the world. So trying to make our buildings better from the ground up with the code. And a perfect world, we wouldn't need to be here because all our buildings would be green already. But I think, unfortunately, it's a long way off. But highly encourage you to look into that. We've got a link on our website talking about that. So that's about it. Thanks so much, and happy to hear your questions.
Great, thank you very much, Brad. Excellent to hear that. Yeah, totally. In terms of what you just mentioned about engaging the whole of the organisation in these initiatives. Really important to do that. So what we'll do is we'll cover off questions later on as a panel. Leading nicely on, Brad actually mentioned EECA and their involvement with the neighbours rating scheme. So really warm welcome to Amber Williams from EECA. Hi Amber, over to you.
Oh, thanks Phil. Kia ora koutou katoa everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you very much Sustainable Business Network for providing this platform. I know we had a couple of polls up earlier that looked at percentages in carbon emissions in this area, and I just wanted to add in one more statistics while we're on that vein, and that is that the business sector accounts for pretty much half of New Zealand's total energy use. So it's great to be able to have this forum to speak to all of you in energy, in business about your energy use. So following on from Brad's presentation that was about how to build more efficient buildings, I'd just like to talk about the operational use of energy in those buildings. So I am, as mentioned, I'm from EECA, the Energy Efficiency Conservation Authority. I'll just bring up a bit of a strategy on a page for those of you who aren't well acquainted with EECA. Our purpose is really to mobilise New Zealanders to be world leaders with clean and clever energy use, and we do that through our focus areas, and that is business, transportation, homes, and also through government leadership, and we want to engage with individual as well. And we have GNLS is also our front page, our open shop. So you may be acquainted with this kind of imagery, but if not, please look out for it in future. So the areas that I'm going to cover today are typical energy use in office buildings, how you can be clean and clever with your energy use, and then importantly the why. What are the benefits for your business and your employees, and how energy savings can equate to money savings. So I'll just start off with that first one. What is typical energy use in office buildings? It is, if we look at the energy sources, we're looking at electricity, and we're also looking at, in some buildings, electricity and direct combustion. In the North Island, direct combustion is gas. So smaller office buildings tend to use electricity as their only energy source, whereas larger building offices can use, or you may see using both electricity and gas. So I just thought I'd bring up a picture, because if we're looking at a large office building, it's good to know what areas of control a typical business has. So there's the tenant load, and that's where we see tenants having control over lighting, for example, over your plug load, so those appliances. Whereas you've got the base building load, and that can involve having obviously the electricity and the lighting and the shared common spaces and your lifts, and also a controlled or a centralized HVAC system. So HVAC is heating, ventilation and air conditioning, and also generators. So if we're looking at where those energy sources are, you can see the lighting and vent and fans. They are all electricity, with heating and cooling. Well, sorry, with heating, whether that's space heating and water heating, that can either be electricity or gas. And obviously that has a bearing on your carbon emissions. So as mentioned earlier, New Zealand is well endowed with renewable electricity, 80 to 85%. So and it's low carbon. So we want to try and move to 100% electricity for our building use as much as possible. For small office buildings, we like I mentioned earlier, that's typically 100% electricity. If you have a hot water cylinder, and if you have heat pumps, then you're pretty much, you are 100% electricity. If you have an HVAC system, if you're in an office building, then you may like to look at where what energy is drawn for those systems. If we're looking at a small office, you probably find that lighting is going to be the highest percentage of your total energy consumption. Other areas, computer servers. On average, a computer server room will use higher or have a higher energy consumption than, for example, your water heating in a commercial building. We've got hot water is typically very minor, and plug loads. These can vary quite considerably. So what can you do? Key thing is to, as mentioned earlier, is when you're actually building building a office building is to ensure you're using efficient materials, and you're going to have require low energy use operationally. However, if you are moving into, or if you're in an existing office building, what can you do? So a key one is to look at how you can primarily reduce demand and also go 100% electric. Can you look at setting targets for your energy use reductions? And a big one is to actually look at your energy use and align it with your building operations. So, for example, the lights are only on when the building is occupied. And I'll bring up this graph here. So EECA commissioned a report. It was prepared by Trevor Nash and at ESP, and it showed that peak electricity with temperatures. As you can see in that top line of blue, that's weekday loads, and the bottom one is weekend loads. So that shouldn't be surprising. We should be using those electricity for commercial buildings Monday to Friday. What is surprising is the teal coloured ones in between, and that is public holidays. So for public holidays, we would expect those to be similar to weekends. However, this graph kind of shows that that perhaps it's not, in these buildings it wasn't programmed to switch off, and some are running with everything on as if it was a normal weekday. So really key to try and align with how the office is used. And also what's good about this graph is knowing that our highest energy consumption for office buildings is used between the months of December to March. So we use a lot more energy for cooling an office building than we do for heating it. And also our public holidays kind of tend to fall, the majority are in January, February, so our hottest months. So if we can really try and make sure that we have things off on our public holidays and when the office isn't in use, you should see some money savings there, and energy savings and carbon savings. Another thing that's come recently with this year of lockdowns and COVID is that our office occupancy rate has changed somewhat, with some people still working from home or doing a mixture. So when an office building is commissioned, we have the air filtration has to be turned over regularly. So and that's based on occupancy. So often once it's set, it doesn't actually change. So if you're actually finding that your occupancy of the building is reduced quite significantly, you don't actually have to go through as many air filter changes as what you would if it was fully occupied. To check how you should change that, you can install a CO2 monitor, and that just checks what is the CO2 rating, and maybe you don't need or require as many air filter changes as you previously did. Minimising those means less energy, less money being spent on that. And I just wanted to also cover off, and probably stop sharing that. Why would you do that? So obviously I've talked about cost being a major driver. And I guess in the current economic climate coming out post-lockdown, cost savings are likely to be a key driver for your business. We've kind of done a bit of research in between the two lockdowns, and we found that businesses are really concentrating on implementing a more leaner mindset. So our research is showing us that energy usage is seen as an easy way to reduce overheads, especially for the immediate time being. So please turn off everything when it's not in use. We used to provide these switch off stickers, and when I go into businesses, sometimes I still see them, even though they're about 10 years old, but they're really effective. So it's just giving your staff that kind of behavioural nudge. Also, I just want to also point out that thermal comfort plays a really important role in workplace satisfaction. So users with some control over their indoor environment are more productive, and we've seen that better air quality can lead to productivity improvements by around 10%. So I will stop there, and if you have any questions for later.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Amber. Yeah, really a few things of interest that we can pick up on in the panel discussion. I also should note that EECA are one of our sponsors for our Climate Action 2025 project. So they're being a really valued partner in that project. Cool. So now please keep asking questions. Very keen to have your questions that we can ask the panel when we after we've heard from Jenny. So welcome to Jenny. Jenny's from Soar Printing. They've been a member of SBN for 10 years and have done some wonderful things in terms of through their carbon measurement and reduction program. So I'm sure that'll be something that Jenny will cover. Hi, Jenny.
Hi everybody. Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk today. I've got some slides which I'll put up, and then hopefully if you've got questions we can answer them at the end. Right, so from the beginning. So first a little bit about Soar. We're a family-owned printing company. We're celebrating 100 years in business this year. And we're located in New North Road and Eden Terrace. So we've got a big office block along the front with a factory behind. Our building is about 3,000 square metres, just to give you some perspective. So we've got about 30 staff who are office-based, and then the rest of the
Jenny, sorry, Phil here. Your screen isn't your screen share. Were you going to...
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yep. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Let me just get back here. Share screen, yes, that will help. Okay, right. Yeah, so just a bit of context about the building. It's about 3,000 square metres. We're in New North Road, Eden Terrace, and we've got about 70 staff.
Sorry, Jenny, that's still not coming up. All
right, maybe I'll just abandon.
Don't worry if it's not working. We can just talk through.
Yeah, sorry, the share screen. Yep, is that working?
There we go. It's coming now.
Great. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm not a great technical person. That's a little bit about the building. Just a little bit about our carbon emission program. We've been in the Carbon Zero program with Toitu for about 10 years now. Our emissions when we started out in 2009 were 396 tonnes. We managed to reduce that to 272 tonnes per year by 2015. And last year we were down to 176 tonnes. So that's a total reduction of 55%. Now, when I started out on this program, I had absolutely no idea what our footprint was or how easy it would be to reduce it. And it actually is easier to measure and reduce than I ever thought it would be. So don't be disheartened if you think it's going to be a really big ask. It's actually not as difficult as I thought it was going to be. This is just a quick graph that shows you our reductions over the last 10 years. So it's our reduction based on our base year of 2009. So this is where we are. This is just for scope 1 and 2, which is basically electricity and fuel. And we'd got down to about 60% below 2009 last year. This is our building, just so you can see a little bit about what it looks like. Up the top is the offices. There's a bit of sort of a production area in the front, a few more offices, and then at the back is the factory, which runs the length of the building. So energy consumption at our New North Road site is one of our biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions. In 2009, we were probably using over 1.1 million kilowatt hours per year. And last year we got that down to 925,000. And that's with significantly more productive output going through the site than 10 years ago. We've been at the site for over 20 years. It's an older building, and it was probably constructed in the early 1970s, and it's likely to be demolished, I think, when our lease runs out in a few years' time. So anything we do, we have to be mindful of the fact now that there's probably not a long payback period. I don't think the building was built, certainly wasn't built with the latest energy efficient technology, but having said that, it was built to take advantage of natural light and ventilation. So back in 2011, I attended an SBN event and was impressed by a speaker who did energy audits. So we decided to get one. I think it cost us about $3,000, and it was money very well spent. It was done partly to see how we could reduce our carbon emissions and also to see how we could reduce costs. And at the time, we were planning on buying a new piece of finishing equipment, a stitcher, and we used to outsource that process. And our electrician said he believed that we would need to get a new transformer on the street to cope with the extra load. And he gave us a quote, or we got a quote to get it upgraded, and it was going to cost $40,000. So our energy consultant did her review, and she believed we could make energy savings of about 10 to 17%. And that would mean the savings that we made would be enough to allow the new piece of machinery in without doing the upgrade, which is what we did. So it was definitely a worthwhile exercise. Some of her other recommendations that came up for the office areas and which we put in place, a lot of it was about changing habits, making better use of the natural lighting and ventilation in the upstairs office area. Now, I think a lot of people come into an office and they feel the need to turn on a light, particularly a big, large office with a lot of people, or they might come in the morning and it's dark and they turn it off and nobody turns it off. So we actually found that we don't need artificial lighting at all in our upstairs offices, so they're not used unless it's a really dark day. We had tinting on some windows, and that was removed to let in more natural light. Air conditioning was discouraged unless really necessary. Once again, I think people get in the habit of turning it on. We have windows in our offices, so we open those if we want some fresh air or need a bit of a breeze coming through. And it's really only on very cold days that we need to turn the heating on. One other thing, I think server rooms were mentioned. We found that the aircon was way cooler than it needed to be there. And also there was a lot of heat coming in from sunlight. So it was sort of shining straight on the servers. So we blacked out the window. It was an unmanned room, and that actually reduced some of the energy. It's just a quick image of our offices without the lights on and the natural light coming in from both sides. In the factory areas, we reduced the artificial lighting in the factory by a number of means. One of them was putting in security night lights to prevent all lights blazing. Our factory runs 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, so we do have a small number of staff on site through the night. They may need access through part of the factory that's not being used, and they were turning all the lights on there for security, so we removed a lot of the lighting and just have security night lights there now. Some of the lights were positioned in the wrong place. It was just wasted light, so there was a lot of work done to fix that up. We replaced some lights with LED lighting in certain places. We also used light sensors in low traffic areas. We have a plate processor room, which really only has people going in to pick the plates up every now and then. So that's got a light sensor on it. The other thing we did was put in a timer system for end of shift and daylight hours on the lighting. So if it's end of shift in the weekend, there's going to be no one there, then it would turn all the lights off. Similarly, it's connected with daylight hours. So once it's light enough, it will turn off the lights in the factory that aren't needed. And the other thing we did was bring in end of shift checklists to power off equipment when it's not needed, and make sure that all our motors and compressors are properly maintained. Another thing we did was our factory roof needed to be replaced, and we installed clear light panels along the top. This lets in a lot of natural daylight and reduce the amount of lights that we need turned on during daylight hours. And we also had it painted in a light reflective colour. You can see that the roof isn't lined, and there's a lot of radiant heat from the sun that comes through in the summertime. A large part of the factory is not air conditioned, so it's more of a comfort thing. It certainly stops it heating up so much and makes it much more comfortable. Some of the things that we did get an EECA grant too. I thought I'd bring that in. Some of the projects that had slightly longer payback period, we applied for an EECA grant, and that helped some of the projects that we got going. More recently, we engaged an energy solutions provider to come in and monitor consumption patterns. So we bought 10 meters, which we've put throughout the building, and they're connected to certain parts of the building or to certain key pieces of machinery, and allows us to narrow down a bit more on potential trouble spots. It did point out recently that we do need to monitor ongoing after hours consumption. Sometimes that creeps up, and you'll find that there's some particular procedure that somebody's not following. Maybe it's just a reminder. The other thing that has also helped us reduce our electricity consumption is improved technology, which I guess isn't directly related to the building, but it does, I guess, affect our footprint. We had one printing press in 2019 that we installed, and it replaced 2 old presses that were beta state-of-the-art technology 10 years ago, and it's resulted in a 21% energy saving on our site at our site last year. So I guess it's just encouraging to know that new technology is bringing out some real power savings. And the other thing that we did that probably doesn't reduce our consumption, but it does reduce our carbon footprint, is we moved to ecotricity in 2016. So they're a renewable energy provider. They're a carbon neutral energy provider, and there's a much lower carbon emissions factor for the power. So that also helped reduce our footprint. So some of the benefits from reducing our carbon footprint, mainly through reducing energy consumption and fuel. It's given us a competitive advantage. A lot of clients want to partner with companies with a good track record on sustainability. So if you're tendering for a print contract, I guess your credentials around sustainable are one of the factors that get looked at. Growth, I think by encouraging new clients and also being smart with how we spend our money, our turnover is up by 26% on 2009, and that's in the printing industry, which is a very competitive industry and probably an industry that's in decline. Cost savings, I've estimated that we've probably saved about 500,000 in fuel and power relative to turnover over the last 10 years. And that certainly helped get us through the GFC and the recent COVID crisis as well. It's also really good for staff engagement and retention. I think staff like to work for a company that's doing their bit for the environment. And also it's allowed us to have a big reduction in carbon emissions, which is obviously really good for the planet. So yeah, I'd encourage you all to get started. It's not as difficult as you think, and it's really encouraging when you can see your emissions drop. And that's probably me. So happy to answer any questions during the question session.
Fantastic, Jenny. Thank you very much. So many great examples there. You know, wonderful for us with what we're trying to do is kind of have examples like Soar as a case study. Really cool. And those dollar savings are, yeah, should inspire many, hopefully.
Yeah, well, it definitely covers the extra cost of compliance with audits and buying carbon offsets and, you know, even some of the projects that we've put in place. So yeah, definitely worthwhile.
Cool. Welcome back, everyone. So yeah, we've had some questions coming through, so we'll have a bit of a chat through some of those. Maybe Jenny, what kind of was the motivation for you to start out on the journey back into
I guess the printing industry is an industry that's probably had quite a bad rap in terms of the environment going back several decades. It's made a huge change probably since 1990. I've seen studies that estimate our industry has reduced its footprint probably by 95% because it's become so much more digital, so many processes have been removed. So it's just something that's always interested us. We're a family business. Our sort of motives for being in business are sort of, you know, I guess we like to do a bit for the environment. We like to support the local community. It's not just about making money. Because we're a family business, we can make the decisions to go carbon neutral without having to, you know, get a board alongside to support us. Yeah, it's good for business. So.
Great. And you mentioned about the, you know, how it can help in terms of staff recruitment and retention to be, you know, to be part of an organization that cares. And I guess related to that, there's, you mentioned about, you know, changing staff habits. How easy was it to kind of do that? You know, things like turning off the lights or not putting on the air conditioner, and, you know, how easy and how did you do it?
I think you get a few champions on board, like a green team, which I think Brad mentioned before. You find the people in your business who really do believe in it and want to try and do their bit. You get them responsible for the light switch. You know, and I think we have staff meetings every month, and we have KPIs on our electricity consumption, and people know whether we're doing well or not doing well. When we put up our carbon emissions and people see how we've reduced them, they actually, you know, they're quite pleased. They like to see us reducing them. It makes them feel good. They buy into it more. You do have to keep reminding people. I mean, old habits die hard. I think the younger people are probably a little bit more focused on it. Some of our staff are a lot older and they maybe just kind of don't think about it so much. So I think it's just keeping it top of mind. And automating stuff helps. You know, then it takes the thinking out of it, you know. So
yeah, it's about, yeah, trying to make these things as easy to do and change the habits and normalize this sort of behavior. Brad or Amber, do you have anything to add in that area in terms of, you know, the behavior change aspect?
One area that we've looked at is if you look at changing behaviours in the office, also look at activities where your employees can make those improvements at home as well, and then you just find you get a better behavioural kind of nudge and patterns kind of start to form. So one client of ours, Watercare, they do an energy week and each year, and that looks at different topics of energy conservation. One day out of that week is targeted at initiatives that their employees can do in the home, and they've just seen that the benefits of if you're mindful in the home, then you bring them back to the office.
Yeah, just to chime into that, I used to do energy and waste audits for businesses, and they would always, I'd show them how they could recycle. Like, oh, I do that at home. I'm like, yeah, you could. What you do at home, you could do at work. So it's both educating people both ways, both at home and both at work, saying you can do all the things that you can do at home, or vice versa. And I think also, you know, not to say it too many times, but I think really having a green team is a fantastic way to find who your champions are, trying to actually encourage them to step up and get support from above. And, you know, I think there's studies, at least in America, I think here in New Zealand too, showing that a lot of millennials are willing to take a pay cut, or really will go out of their way to find an organization that is green and cares about the future. So you're going to get potentially better employees if you're showing that you actually care about this stuff. So it's just a win-win-win, in my opinion, for that.
Totally. Changing tack a bit, although all these things are related. Obviously, the disruption we've had and we are having through COVID. A question here. What's your evaluation of the engagement level of SMEs and business associations with energy efficiency before and after COVID-19? So any general comments on that? I mean, maybe Jenny, from starting at, you know, business level.
Well, our energy consumption is way down this year because level 4, we were only able to operate for essential services only. So a large number of our clients aren't essential services. We've been able to print for them. So we had a very small team through level 4 lockdown. So our energy consumption was way down, but then so was our turnover. But I guess I guess it was just a natural function. Turnover was down and so was energy.
But does it encourage more of an efficient mindset, because you're kind of wanting to keep costs as low as possible? So it's another opportunity area, really.
Yeah, I think the staff realise that too. You know, everyone wants to do their bit to try and help us all get through this as best we can. So I think watching our fuel consumption, our energy consumption, you know, is something that everybody's thinking about a bit more for sure.
Amber, from EECA's perspective, I think you've done some research, or you've commissioned some research in that area.
Yes, we have, Phil. So I guess before COVID, the mindset was slightly different to what it is now. I guess before COVID, we were more interested on looking at, and when I say we, I mean New Zealand Inc., was looking at carbon emissions and how we can move towards zero carbon emissions. I think coming out of lockdown, our research that we kind of commissioned between the two lockdowns showed us that that mindset has changed. It's more on how to be leaner with and the here and now. Businesses are in that kind of survival mode. Where can we put in leaner measures on our electricity, for example, or on all of our outgoings? How can we be a more efficient business? But also one other thing that our research showed is that employers are also have come out of lockdown with a more community focus. So, and looking at how can we provide a better environment and look after our staff. There's more of that nurturing kind of aspect too. So I think that goes hand in hand with energy efficiency and creating a great work office environment and a comfortable environment.
Definitely. Cool. Brad, maybe one for you. This is regarding the variety of kind of ratings schemes out there. Green Leads, Green Star, Neighbours, Passive House. You know, what are the more relevant ones? I know you've kind of got a more of maybe a vested interest in this, but keen to hear your thoughts generally.
Yeah, I mean, all those are basically third-party certification systems to prove that what you say you're doing is actually you actually are creating and operating green buildings. So we advocate for all of them. You know, we're a bit biased since we're basically do Green Star and Home Star, but nothing against LEED, which is definitely more of the US / used internationally. BREEAM is basically a British-based system. As we already mentioned, Neighbours is from Australia, which they basically have mandated it, which has been fantastic. It actually has made behavior change dramatically in Australia, and thankfully EECA has brought it over for New Zealand, neighbors NZ. So that's here in New Zealand also, and that's for existing buildings for operation of office space only. GRESB is a fantastic tool, but it's much more about financial aspects and actually businesses showing that they're doing something to be sustainable. What we're hearing is if a building is going to be Green Star rated, it gives them many points, so it's kind of tied together. But Green Star is basically the tool that's used both in Australia and here in New Zealand by GBCA over in Australia and us here in New Zealand. As you mentioned, there's Passive House, which looks at, it's a great tool, but basically looks at one part of what we look at. It's more about the energy efficiency and the tightness of the building. And then there's also the Living Building Challenge, which is a fantastic tool, but it's pretty high standard, basically saying everything that's falling on your building, you've got to capture it and use it, and nothing can leave your building. So it's a great tool, but pretty hard to get to. So yeah. And then of course is Homestar, which we use, and it's been created here in New Zealand for the residential market.
Cool, thank you very much. This is a comment and a question. Jenny, congratulations on the great work and results. This is from Maurizio. What would be your advice to companies starting out on their sustainability journey?
Well, I'm an accountant, and you can't manage what you can't measure. I would say start measuring what you consume, and the more you can narrow it down, the better, you know, by site or by time of day. And then you can sort of pinpoint the areas to sort of work on, and you can see how you're doing. An energy audit was a really good idea. It really paid off in our case because we were at that point where we were sort of reaching the capacity of our building. And, you know, we've been here probably another 9 years since that audit, and we've been fine. Our energy consumption's lower now. I guess you pick off the easy ones first, the ones that don't require a lot of capital investment, you know, and get an expert in to help you. You know, I don't know all the answers. Some of the things that were suggested to us, I never would have thought of at the time. And, you know, there are EECA grants, I believe, if, you know, for certain projects. So it's worthwhile seeing what's available there. If something perhaps has a longer payback, you might be able to get some support that way. But, you know, a lot of small changes can actually make quite a big difference, which was what was the situation in our case. A lot of small things all added up. So, yeah.
And I guess it's that continuous improvement, you know, that you're never at the end of the journey. You've always got new things to do or things to tweak or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I think looking at the efficiency of, I guess it's not the building so much, but if you're buying a new piece of equipment, be it a photocopier or whatever, look at the energy rating of it. It's one of the key criteria we have when we're getting new printing equipment now, because it can make a huge difference to your energy consumption. And technology keeps improving, and it's amazing how much a new piece of equipment can be more efficient than the one before it. So, you know, if you are getting a piece of machinery or a piece of office equipment that is going to use a lot of power, just check its ratings and see how it compares to what else is out there. I guess if you're moving into a new building, you want to look at what the energy rating of your building's like. We're in an old building. It's probably served us pretty well. There's probably not a lot more we can do now, so it's just fine tuning and making sure we're keeping up with what we started out now. Cool.
Quick one on the energy expertise you got in and doing the audit. Was that quite easy to find the right person to help with that?
I just happened to go to an SBN event, and I think that you had a consultant who spoke there, and I had to chat with her after the meeting. She gave me her business card. She came out and, you know, we had a chat with her, and then it wasn't long after that we got her on board, and yeah, she did a great job. So yeah, worthwhile.
Another option is the Carbon and Energy Professionals Network, which used to be EMANS. I believe they probably have some people who you can find from their website.
Really good. Yeah, emans.org.nz, I think, is it?
Yeah, I think they changed their name though. I think they're called Carbon and Energy Professionals now, New Zealand. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, CEP, that's right. And also on EECA's website, we have a list of energy auditors. So you can go to eeca.govt.nz.
And I know you've got so much good information about energy use on the EECA site and the GenLess site, genless.govt.nz. There's so much good information there. I'm just going to ask one final question. We've got this important election coming up, and I know some of you work in government agencies, so you might want to declare, political neutrality. But what would be, the one sort of policy or incentive you'd like to see the next government do in this broad area of improving carbon performance of our buildings? Who would like to go first with that nice easy one?
If you don't mind, I'll go first because I got to leave in a minute or two. I think I already kind of mentioned it before, but basically trying to encourage, trying to make our buildings, both new and existing, energy efficient. I think one of the parties was suggesting we take away the healthy home standard, which I think is a very bad idea. It's a way to actually employ people and make people have better places to live that are healthier and reduce people being sick. So it's a win-win in my opinion and our opinion. And I think it should be advocated for and basically keep what we got and just make it better going forward.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I know you've got to go, but thank you very much. Really appreciate your contribution. Amber, do you want to make any broad comments about no obligation?
Yeah, I think I might sit that question out. Anything political is probably not advisable that I answer.
Yeah, Jenny.
Well, I guess just support for businesses to get on board with carbon emissions. I think probably a lot of small to medium-sized businesses are probably, it's more the thought about what it is, and I don't have that knowledge. I don't know what it is. This is all too hard. But I think if we could come up with some sort of simplified programs to make people realize that it's not actually that difficult to do, you'd probably find more companies buying into it. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's a really nice way of finishing. Thanks again, Jenny, Amber, and Brad for joining. Yes, nice end, Jenny. We didn't plan this, but that's a nice kind of what we're trying to do with our Climate Action 2025 project, is to get businesses to start out on this carbon reduction journey.
Yeah,
so
it is. It's great to see your carbon emissions coming down, and it's really good to see that's actually not that hard to do. You don't have to be a climate scientist to do it.
No, exactly. So again, thank you very much for joining this afternoon or this lunchtime. We will have more webinars from the Sustainable Business Network. We will have our next Climate Action Countdown event on the 4th of November. That is available to register now. It's another free lunchtime event. And please keep an eye out on our other events that we run, sustainable.org.nz, and you'll find the events listed on that. So thank you very much again for joining. Thanks to the presenters again. Until the next time, ka kite anō, and stay safe and warm. Thank you.